This is a masterpiece, and thanks to my dad, I now have a strong, good-looking, reliable Sissy bar and rack for my Kimco spade. When designing this, we took the approach of both looks and functionality. So even when I'm not using this rack, it's still going to look great, as you can see now. When we started this project, we knew we needed something strong, but we didn't want to make it too heavy. We ended up using 3/4 inch, 14 gauge, square tube steel. We picked up two 8-foot sections, and at the end of the project, there's 3 to 4 feet left. These two sections, 8 foot each, 16 feet total, cost us just under $15. For the rack, we used a 12 by 12, 16 gauge piece of sheet metal that you can find at Lowe's or Home Depot, and that cost $20. For the bolts, we used 4 5/16 2-inch bolts to attach the sheet metal to the rack. For the Sissy bar pad, we used 1/2 inch plywood, 2-inch foam pad from Hobby Lobby, and waterproof deco vinyl, also from Hobby Lobby. I had the plywood on hand, so that was basically free to me. The foam pad cost $3.99, and the vinyl cost around $5 or $6. Starting here, where the Sissy bar and the bike are connected, we cut two 7-inch pieces of tube steel, so it would give us some options on where we were going to mount our vertical piece. We weren't sure at that point where it needed to be. So we cut 7-inch tube steel piece for both sides, loosely mounted them to the frame. I sat on the bike, and my dad started to figure out where the best angle for me as a rider this needed to be. And we knew that we wanted to overhang the seat. You can see there's 3 to 4 inches of the seat covered by the rack, and this is intentional because I don't sit all the way back there. I sit somewhere right here. So when we designed this, we wanted this to be in the most comfortable or optimum position for me. My dimensions will be up on screen. After determining this is where it needed to be, about 2 inches in from the end, we cut two 4-inch pieces of tube steel to come up. That's where we're going to start the main Sissy bar pieces. Once we had cut and welded this piece and this piece together, we now needed to focus on the main sidebars of the Sissy bar. And this was very easy. We started off with very long pieces of the tube steel, and my dad just put his hand on my back at different heights, and I told him where I wanted to feel the Sissy bar. And it ended up being right here. This is about 13 to 14 inches. I think it's about 13 1/8 from here to here. Now the width obviously was decided for us because this was mounted here, we mounted the other side, and we just connected them together. So we just cut these to fit, which turned out to be roughly 9 3/4. We decided to do 3 connections. One here, just above the seat and in front of the rack. One here, slightly higher than middle. I didn't want it directly in the middle. And then one at the top, obviously. Now the reason I didn't want this directly in the middle is because I knew I had a plan to put a Sissy bar pad on this section, and I wanted this square to be the support for it. The reason I wanted one here was because I wanted to be able to hook straps and loops through this bar to hold things onto this rack. It also provides support to the frame, obviously. After this, and the 3 supports were cut and welded, the next thing we worked on was the rack for the frame. So we waited to build this on the spot. We weren't sure how wide it needed to be until these were connected. This piece here and the one on the other side both needed to have an angle cut right here where it is connected to the Sissy bar to get an appropriate angle. Now we could have gone a little bit further down, but I'm very happy with how it turned out. The main goal, like I said in the beginning of the video, was to make something useful and good looking. So we could have made this rack bigger, but we decided not to because we wanted it to flow with the look of the Sissy bar and the bike. And I think we nailed it. After we built the rack and the frame, a close friend of mine and my dad both recommended that we put some additional supports around the welded areas so that they don't take too much abuse from loading things on the rack or me leaning back too hard. So my plan is to add 2 pieces of support on both sides, which I haven't done yet. Now, after we had the frame for the Sissy bar and the frame for the rack welded, connected, and built, essentially, it was on to grinding, Bondo, and grinding. So we had to grind some of the rough edges of the steel. We also grinded down some of the welds to make them smoother. And then we moved on to Bondo, filling in any spots that may not look very nice or may not be very smooth. We filled those in, let it harden overnight, came back, and we grinded again to smooth out all the Bondo. After we grinded down the joints to our desired smoothness, we moved on to mounting the sheet metal on the rack. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is a 12 by 12 16 gauge piece of sheet metal, and this needed to be cut to fit the rack. This is not 12 by 12. You'll see the dimensions on screen. Something my dad did, which I really liked and appreciated, was he left a small gap between the bottom support bar of the Sissy bar and the sheet metal for the rack. This is going to allow me to put straps through here to secure things to the rack. And after all the metal work was complete, the Sissy bar, the rack frame, and the sheet metal for the rack, we moved on to painting. And we used 1 coat of primer. We used 3 coats of glossy black and 3 coats of clear coat. After my dad and I had finished painting the rack and all the metal work was complete, the frame was done, the rack was done, it was on to the Sissy bar pad. Now, I returned home to do this several days after we had finished everything else, and I did some researching online and I couldn't find anything that would work for a project like this, and I was very disappointed. So that's why I wanted to show you guys how I made this, and surprisingly it was very easy and it was very cheap. So starting with the hard piece of wood inside, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, a 2-inch piece of foam, and a piece of deco vinyl, which is waterproof. Now, this is the first time I've made something like this, so I don't really have any experience in upholstery or anything like that, but as you can see, I think it looks really good. And it was pretty simple. The first thing I did was I took a 12 by 6 inch piece of the plywood. I sanded down all the corners to make it very smooth. And then I cut out a piece of foam to fit slightly over each edge so that the wood wouldn't protrude out on one side. I then hot glued the foam to the wood, which obviously made it stay in place. This made working with the vinyl much easier. Now, when it came to the vinyl, I wasn't sure exactly what to do or how to work with it. So I did link 2 videos in the description that helped me, especially on the corners for the vinyl, to figure out a way to make these corners nice and tight. I don't have any exact measurements for the vinyl. I started on one side, started stapling, and when I got to the other side, I just cut off the excess. And the last part was figuring out a way to mount the Sissy bar pad to the Sissy bar frame. And I had several ideas, and again, I couldn't find much online. But my final idea was to cut 2-inch wide strips, 1 on each side, 2 for the top and 2 for the bottom. Now, the reason I did this instead of one big strip on each side was because I wanted space, again, similar to the bottom, to slide straps through. So now I can slide a strap through here, through here, through here, and they'll come out here. I can do the same with the bottom, and I can do the same down here. This is going to allow me to attach things to this rack. And there it is, the finished product. This is beautiful, came out amazing, it's strong, it's practical, and it's going to last me as long as I own this bike. I'm glad that we built it, and I'm forever grateful to my dad who helped me and taught me through the entire process. If you guys have any questions about the rack, the pad, or the bike, please leave a comment and I'll address it.
Rapping when they own me to sing on. They all want an album, so I gave them 20 singles. Yeah, I'm trying to get a hit, that's why I swing.